for Texas Project first, but she never answered. I don't know if they talked. I did whatever she was asking. So
There you go.
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
this meeting is being recorded.
Yes. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Please forgive me. I am so sorry it took so long to share my screen, to record everything in between. My name is Judy Blake. I am a program coordinator for Family to Family Network. I have on with me Leslie Lawson. Want to say hi, Leslie?
Hello, everybody.
And,
Hello.
and Christina Zavala.
hello, everyone. Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us today. Again, my sincere apologies for taking so long to get set up. I don't know why that happened. I've only done this 87,000 times before. So what we're going to talk about today is understanding your child's IEP. Let's understand what it means. Some of you may have your IEPs available. Follow along. That would be great. I'm just going to, can you all see my screen? And did it come to the welcome page?
Yes.
Great. So again, very safe place, a lot of information. If you don't feel comfortable asking a question, please private message myself or Leslie, and we'll go ahead and answer as quickly as possible. So just a few abbreviations, just to make sure that you understand. It's kind of the basic foundation. ECI stands for Early Childhood Intervention. If you have a child that is 4 or 5, they might be in ECSE, Early Childhood Special Education, and that was formerly called PPCD.
3.
Everything that we talk about is based on IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's federal law. It makes sure that public schools are serving the educational needs of students who have disabilities. So what you have is you have an ARD meeting, which stands for Admission, Review, and Dismissal. Your child has what we call an IEP, an Individualized Education Plan. So my son, who is now 30, had a different IEP than Leslie's son. It shouldn't be cookie cutter. It should be individualized, addressing the needs of each child. Some of our kids might have some behavior challenges, and that's okay. When that happens, you can request that the school perform what we call a functional behavioral assessment. It's called an FBA. And this can either be done by a BCBA or a school psychologist, a licensed school psychologist. Once that FBA is completed, the school, with your approval, can implement what we call a BIP, a behavior intervention plan. So I just wanted to go over some basic terminology to kind of get us going for the next hour. So this is a child's initial sheet, and you'll see we've marked out the information. Always make sure that this is your child. Believe it or not, we've heard stories where the first page is the child and the second page is a different child, because sometimes they're copying and pasting. So please, please make sure that all of the documents are for your child. Make sure the date of birth is correct. If they have an ID number, it's the right school district. If an interpreter was used to assist in conducting the meeting, make sure that box is checked. If for some reason you needed an interpreter and didn't get one, feel free to make sure that you have that interpreter. You can stop the meeting and say, I didn't realize I could have an interpreter and we need to reschedule. If you are on this call and everyone is speaking in English and you are not understanding what they are saying, please, please tell them you want an interpreter. Give them notice and let them know. You'll see where it talks about information about school personnel. Additional evaluation is needed. The part that's highlighted, full and individual evaluation. What you want to make sure of when you're having a school meeting, is this new information or is it a review of existing information? And that is called a read. So you'll see on this here, where it says full individual evaluation at the top, the date of the report is November 16th of 2020. The next one would be due November 15th of 2023. Every 3 years, the school should be completing a full and individual evaluation. You're going to have ARD meetings every year, and that may be what we call a read, that review of existing information. And that's fine. But we have families who say, you know, my child had an evaluation when they were 6 and they're now 11 and they haven't been reevaluated yet. All they're doing is going through the existing information. That isn't supposed to happen. So please make sure that every 3 years, your child is getting a full and individual evaluation. You're going to notice at the bottom where it says meets eligibility criteria. What is the primary disability? What is the secondary disability? Make sure you understand what those disabilities are. And if you don't, ask questions. These meetings are there for parents to understand what this document is and how it impacts their child. And I've had parents that I've talked to that I just had this feeling they really didn't understand their child's disability. One disability they might put on there is, it used to be emotional disturbance, and thank God now it's been changed to emotional disability. Ask what that means. What are they talking about when they say emotional disability? If they're telling you that your child has autism and you don't know what autism means, ask. It's okay to ask questions. There is no such thing as a silly question. Your time is to be educated, and that time is during these meetings.
And you should already know your child's disability label, because the child will not receive special education services until the initial full and individual evaluation is done. And they have to go over all of that with you. You have to agree with it. You have the opportunity for an independent evaluation if you don't agree with theirs. So you should know that. But we do talk to a lot of parents and they don't know what their child's disability label for special education is. And it can sometimes be different than their medical diagnosis.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you brought that up. And they're not supposed to be using non-categorical early childhood any longer. So to my knowledge, that isn't supposed to be used anymore. If you still see it on there, ask them, what does that mean? And what is the actual disability?
The reason they use that is,
Well, not anymore, though. I thought it changed.
yeah, for a very young child. So, and I wanted to make a correction, because early childhood special education, or PPCD, starts at age 3, not 4.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to say 3. My apologies.
No worries. A lot of times for a child that young, they don't want to place a label like autism or intellectual disability, because the child's so young and there can be so many changes in those early years. So that's why they were using non-categorical. But now I think, they've gotten a lot better. Just, you only need one label to be served. So I wouldn't want to be putting an intellectual disability label on a very young child if there's another label that can be used, like autism, because a lot of children, when they're very young and have autism, may appear to have an intellectual disability, but as they get a little bit older, they don't. So you don't want to saddle them with that diagnosis or that label at a very young age.
Just make sure that you understand what it is that they're putting on there and how it impacts your child. So on the next page, you'll see where it talks about development of the individualized educational plan. And again, individualized is the key. You want to know where your child is at. And that's why they call them present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. Because if you don't know where your child's at, it's very difficult to set goals. You don't know what to work on, and you want to meet them where they're at, and then you always want to raise the bar. No child ever rises to low expectations, and to the extent possible, you always want to presume competence. So make sure that you know where your child is at. So where we have put, this is a very specific example of what the child can do and what they struggle with. You want to make sure that you have a draft copy of this IEP before the ARD meeting. You want to make sure that it describes your child. It's a very clear picture of your child, and you want to review it. So the first time that you are seeing this document should not be at the ARD meeting, because you want to highlight, you want to make notes. So if your ARD meeting is scheduled on a Thursday, you would want to have that document maybe by Monday, Tuesday at the latest. Give yourself a couple of days, whatever time you need, to look through it, highlight, ask questions. Several areas are going to be discussed on this page and the next page. Make sure that all areas are included. You want to make sure that they're looking at the strengths of your child. And if this doesn't describe your child at all, maybe they were on the heels of getting sick or just getting over sick. Maybe they were having a bad day. And as Leslie, I'm so grateful that she mentioned about getting a second opinion. If you don't agree with any of this, we will share information on how you can request an individualized an individualized evaluation. And then the school will give you a list of names, and they will pay for that.
But you don't have to pick it somebody on their list.
You do not.
And this part is generally referred to as the PLAF, and that just stands for the present levels of academic and functional performance. So if they talk about the PLAF,
that's what they're talking about.
Yeah, you want it to be a really good picture of your child, so you know they know where they're starting at and where they need to go and what their struggles are, so you can create good goals and objectives. And you're going to add a lot of input to the PLAF. And so if your child is able to do something or not able to do something that they have wrong in here, you want to make sure that gets corrected.
Absolutely. Feel free to make those corrections, because that's really important. It needs to be a clear picture of where your child is at today. And it's going to talk about self-care and motor skills, cognition. It'll have the accommodations in here.
And this is one school district's format for an IEP. Your school district may use a different software. So it may not look exactly like this, but it's important to see all the different components in the IEP. And so that's what we're shooting for. And another thing is, because this child is very young, you're not going to see a lot of academic goals and objectives that you would on a child that's in kindergarten and above.
So make sure that any accommodations are specific to your child. And you can always add to this and make suggestions. You want to have open-ended questions during ARD meetings. So if your goal for your child is for them to be included to the extent possible with their peers, which inclusion is very important, what's that going to look like, and what is it going to take to make that happen? Brainstorming is really important during ARD meetings. If you ask yes or no questions, you're going to get yes or no answers. So a lot of times we will say, what will it take for this to happen for my child to achieve this goal? You know, for my kids, they had to have steps broken down. They needed extra time on assignments. They needed small group settings. Things like that made a very big difference. They a lot of times had, my younger son had a modified test taking. He had a lot of that because if he were to see 50 questions, that would be too overwhelming to him. So he would have maybe 30 questions or 20 questions. If it was multiple choice, instead of having 5 answers, maybe he would have 3 answers. So the next section on here, the transition. The ARD committee has determined the transition services are not appropriate for this age at this time. So yeah, you want to start talking transition at age 14. So for some of these younger kids, transition is not needed. So you just want to make sure that those boxes are checked in the appropriate spots. Does the child's behavior impede the child's own learning or that of others? So here, this child, the answer was yes. So the behavior intervention plan that I talked about, has it been done yet? No. But they say here, regular discipline has been set in and it will be followed. Maybe at some point they need to perform a functional behavioral analysis for this child. What is causing that challenging behavior? And then what steps can be taken to make sure that the behavior is changing, not impeding learning, and not impeding the learning of others. Talks about language, the communication needs of the student, that the student is affected by autism. They have communication needs and deficits. They are going to need assistive technology. The child does need assistive technology. So things like that, these are all things that should be discussed in your ARD, in your meeting, to make sure that they are addressed. Leslie, did you want to add anything to this?
Nope, that's good.
Okay. So on the next part, again, there's a further explanation that this child is going to use visual supports, visual schedules, that's going to help with the routine. That really helped for my son. When he was young, they used the picture symbols. Then he could learn more once he learned how to read, he could have a visual in writing of what the schedule was going to be. And what he would do if he had questions. So all of those things make a huge difference to our kids. For preschool age children, the disability affects the child's participation in appropriate activities in the following way. And then they specifically state the student needs access to specialized instruction to make progress. Some of those kids might need more instruction. Some may not need as much. You see what works best for your child. So measurable goals can be really challenging. So on this goal, we talk about behavior and its functional behavior. And what they're talking about is the duration is going to be from November through May. So basically through the rest of the school year. And it's telling you, these are the benchmarks or the short-term objectives. You'll see at the bottom who is going to be implementing them. Hold on, let me just admit people. Okay. And how are they going to evaluate? They are going to keep data. Data is really important for parents and for teachers because without data, you can't tell if the child has progressed at all. You can't tell if they've regressed. You can't tell where they're at. So periodic reports on the progress that the student is making, that is how you're going to know if they're achieving that goal. So make sure that they're collecting that data. You know, we always say, show us the data, because that's how you know if that child is progressing or not.
So if you just see teacher observation on there, you need to get it changed.
Yep.
Because at the end of the 9 weeks, that teacher's got so many kids there, she's not going to remember. How is she? It would be like a general ed teacher not keeping homework grades and test grades and just trying to guess for every student at the end of the 6 or 9 weeks, whatever they use.
And not only that, observation can be subjective, and you want real hard data. Were they able to complete this task? How many directives do they need? So things like that really will make that difference in letting the, hold on, I'm trying to, yeah, for some oh, here we go. Okay. Sorry about that. Leslie, as people are coming in, I think I'm going to have you take over so I can mark them present.
Okay.
Is there anything more that you want to say on this page?
No, I mean, go to the next one.
Okay.
And I was going to say also, you'll notice in this IEP, because they had their annual ARD in November, that's why you're going to see different dates. So they have from November till the end of the school year, and then you're going to also see goals and objectives for the new school year until the annual ARD date. So that could be confusing on this one. A lot of us don't have our annual ARD meetings until the end of the year, closer to April or May, but this one is in the middle of the year. And that's probably due to the child's birthday when they had their initial ARD meeting. But the main thing, you're going to see a lot of goals. We're not going to go over them. You're going to see that these goals, the annual goal, which is at the top, by the end of the end of 2021, 2022 school year is going to be the annual goal. It's very specific the way it's written out. You want it to be specific and measurable. And then the short-term objectives or the benchmarks are going to break it down by, the first 9 weeks, the second 9 weeks. And these are just good examples of well-written goals. If goals are not written well, if you don't understand how they're going to take data on it, they're not very well written. So you want them to be very measurable and specific. So we can skip a few pages.
These are all just talking about behavior.
Yeah.
And then we come to social skills.
Yeah, these are a lot of behavior goals. Again, generally, if there's a lot of behavioral goals, you're probably going to need a functional behavioral assessment that's going to look where a licensed school psychologist or BCBA comes in and observes the behaviors, what happens before, during, and after, and then they get together and write a behavior intervention plan that everybody has to follow, and even trains the staff on how to implement the behavior intervention plan. But there's just several examples of different measurable goals, and I just wanted you guys to see that. They're not necessarily goals for your child, but just see how they're written very specifically and then have very specific short-term objectives.
Are you now seeing the social skills, Leslie, at the top?
Yes, I'm going to let me scroll down. If you can scroll down to the one that's going to have communication.
Yep, there you go.
So if your child has a speech delay or communication issues, these are some very good, well-written goals. You'll see here they're using picture symbols for this child, which is a low-tech form of assisted technology. Sometimes they'll use high-tech, like a voice output device, but there needs to be goals for. So all the goals and objectives should tie back to the PLAFT. So if a lot of times we'll read somebody's PLAFT and then look at their goals and objectives, and they don't connect. So like there'll be goals for things that the PLAF said they could already do, or they won't be goals for things that they need help with. So you want to make sure it all makes sense, because you have your evaluation and input from everybody that knows the child well. And from that, you develop the PLAFT. And then from that, you develop the IEP goals and objectives. And so it kind of goes in that order, because you can't decide on placement until you have all that, and the accommodations also in there. And you don't want every accommodation checked, because then the teacher's going to just say, oh, everything's checked. How can I do all of that? You want the accommodations to be very specific to your child. And you also want to know the difference between an accommodation and a modification. So an accommodation doesn't change what the child is supposed to be able to learn and master, but a modification reduces what the child is going to be responsible to learn. And that puts a student on a very different path education-wise, because if they're not responsible for all the curriculum each year, they're going to fall further and further behind. So you want to try to work with, it's not going to be possible for every student. My son needed modifications, curriculum modifications, but some students only need accommodations. Like they need to sit in the front of the room. They need a hard copy of notes. They need more time on their test, or they need it broken down in
Setting
smaller
to take a
steps.
test. Whereas the modifications are actually altering the assignment.
Right. Like instead of having 20 spelling words, the
Mhm.
student may have 5, or they may just circle the word, or there's just there's a big difference between accommodations and modifications. And it's okay if your student needs modifications, but you just want to be aware of that, because a lot of times parents aren't aware of that until later, and they didn't realize that their student wasn't responsible for all of the curriculum, and therefore they're not on the path maybe to go to a 4-year university or a community college. They may be on a path to go to a program for students who have intellectual disabilities or something like that. On this one too, you're going to see that the teacher, it used to be called PPCD, now we call it early childhood special education teacher, and the licensed speech pathologist are both going to be responsible for the communication and the speech goals. They're going to work together on that.
And you also see here where there's data collection. It's fine for them to observe, that's no problem. But you want to have that data because you want to make sure those goals are being met.
Yeah, that's very important. Sometimes they're going to put work samples too. So a lot of times I see that, and I ask the parent, do you get work samples home? And they're like, no. How do you know your student is making progress if there's no work samples? And that's how they're evaluating whether they're making progress. Or are they just not sending them home, or are they not, or there are really no work samples? So you just want to be aware of all that. And then if you go to the one, Judy, that says cognition, and so just wanted to point out, depending on the age of your child, there should also be academic goals if needed. And you're not seeing a lot of that because this is a very young child. But once your child's in pre-K, there are benchmarks and academic goals for pre-K and up. So let's see, what are we going to go to next? Self-care. So for a lot of young children, you're probably going to have some goals for self-care. Here's one for potty training. And a lot of times parents tell me, oh, they said they can't work with that. Well, They can. This is definitely going to make a difference in a student's education if they're able to use the bathroom on their own and master this skill, especially if the parents are also working on it at home. So you're going to have some self-care goals if the student's very young. And then we can go down to accommodations.
Okay.
And this is what I was talking about, like they have every accommodation marked, and that's probably fine, but you want to help the teacher out and let her know specific accommodations that really help your child that work for you at home. That can be very helpful. So
And
make
if there's issues where, we all say the child has the issues at home but not at school or vice versa, let the school know that. Let the school know that if something is successful at home but not at school, well, we need to look at that. And then if something is working well in the school and then not at home, what can be done at the home to achieve that goal as well there?
Right. And another thing, just make sure you look at everything that's marked and how it's marked, because if there's no behavior intervention plan, does that need to happen? Like if the behaviors, if your student has behavior goals, but they're not getting better, they're not making progress, maybe we do need an FBA and a behavior intervention plan. If they say assistive technology is needed, what does that look like? Did they do a formal assistive technology evaluation to determine what assistive technology needs to be provided to help your student make appropriate progress on the general ed curriculum? And then you're going to also see on here, does your child need personal care services? Because I've seen that marked on some students, and I'll ask mom about that, and they're like, they have this marked, but my student doesn't really need personal care services. So you just want to make sure everything makes sense. Let's see, the next one will be the state assessment is the STAR testing, and it's not in every grade. And so that'll be marked. All students are required to take some kind of some form of the STAR testing, unless there are ways to opt out. The school will tell you there's not, but there are ways to opt out of the STAR testing if you choose to do so. There are groups out there that help you know how to do that if that's something you want to do. The physical fitness assessment, if there's limited English proficiency, you want to make sure that's addressed. A big thing too is district-wide assessments. We almost always see this marked no. So I don't agree with that. I think benchmark testing should be marked yes for most students with disabilities, because that lets you know where they are in relation to their typical peers, because there's going to be pre-K benchmarks, kindergarten, and then all of the grade benchmarks test until they get older. But they do those usually in the beginning of the year and maybe later in the year too, so they can get an idea of where all the students are. Sometimes that helps them do small groups to address some students, even typical students that are maybe a little behind on reading or math or whatever. So it's a good thing to have your students take the benchmark testing, because you're going to get an IEP report card, or you should, that's going to give you percentages or whatever. And then they're also going to get a regular report card when they get to certain grades. And some parents see the regular report card and they're graded more on their IEP. So I've had parents in high school think that their student with a disability that's been on a modified curriculum because of the report card is going to be cum laude or whatever, because they don't understand how a modified curriculum affects the grading. So we just want you to know, we want you to know if your student, we don't want you to wait till third grade to find out that your student is not close to grade level on reading or math, if that's something that's possible for your student. And it can be confusing since you're getting IEP report cards and regular report cards. This student, of course, was not old enough to take the STAR test. And so, but pay attention to that, because some students are going to take the regular STAR, some are going to take the STAR All 2, and you want to understand all that and talk to them, have it explained, look at the TEA website, and make sure all the accommodations on the testing are going to be provided too when you get to that age. The next one is least restrictive environment. So this is really important, and we're talking about whether or not the child is going to have access to the general ed class. And in the spirit of the law for least restrictive environment, students should be included with their same age typical peers in the general education classes, with all supports and accommodations and services necessary to make appropriate progress for them. It doesn't mean they have to be able to do everything that a typical kid can do. So it can look very different for each student, but you're going to see this a lot in the IEP because it's so important for our students to have typical role models for behavior, for language, for social skills, to have a sense of belonging. And there is even least restrictive environment options for pre-K. I know some children don't go to the early childhood special education class. They might go to a church preschool and still get speech services and OT from the public school. They may instead go to the pre-K class that's for the students who don't, who have limited English proficiency, or maybe who meet the qualifications due to their parents' income, and then they have special education support in that class. And then other students may go to PPCD or the early childhood special education class, but maybe they're pulled out and they do some things with kindergarten or with pre-K. So it doesn't have to be all one way. It's just going to look different for each student. So just want you to know that. And even if your student goes to private school, or if you're homeschooling in Texas, if you're homeschooling, that's considered the same as private school. The student can still access baby speech therapy or some other services through the public school, but it will be the school district where the private school is located. So that's just something to think about. A lot of times they'll say that because your child needs more services and needs specialized instruction, that they can't be included at all. And I just totally disagree with that. My son has autism and an intellectual disability, and when he was young, he needed a full-time para to help him be able to access the regular ed class. And it was so important, especially in the young days, because he was able to build community with the other kids in our neighborhood. He was able to ride the regular ed bus with the help of a neighbor student. And, well, first my other son, and then when he went on to middle school, there was another young man that was in our neighborhood that helped him ride the regular ed bus. And then that translated into, when he got to middle school, he had a group of typical friends to sit with in lunch. He wasn't over at the life skills table sitting with the teacher and not having access to his neighborhood friends. So It does make a difference, but it's very individualized. And of course, you're the parent and you always are going to know what's best for your child. And that's what you should, I don't want to say fight for, but advocate for.
It's something else I want to mention too, is when it comes to field trips, your child, if the class is going on field trips, your child should be going on field trips as well. And sometimes, we've had parents say, well, the school says I have to go, but I work. No, parents, you do not have to go. And if you want to go, that's fine if your schedule allows you to do that. But field trips are really important. We want kids out in the community. We want them with their peers doing things just like everyone else. And it's important that your child participate in that as well.
Yes, that's very important. Further down on this page, you're going to see it talks about what does the ARD committee determine if any staff training is required. So parents need to ask about that. What training has the teacher had or the paraprofessional had in regards to assistive technology, autism, inclusion, or Down syndrome? So like my son had a paraprofessional that was with him when he was in regular ed. Most paraprofessionals, they're wonderful. We've had wonderful paraprofessionals, but sometimes the only requirement is to have a high school diploma. What training have they been provided to know how to appropriately include a student with autism or with an intellectual disability in regular ed? You can't just throw them in there and hope that it works. So, and the same with teachers. A lot of regular education teachers and even special education teachers don't have specialized training in certain areas. So we want to make sure we ask questions about that and hopefully get training for that. I know when Cameron was little, I advocated for that, and they sent a group of teachers to the Inclusion Works conference, and then they came back and shared that with other teachers, and or maybe they go to the Texas State Autism Conference and learn a lot about autism and teaching students with autism and come back and share that with other teachers too. So just pay attention again to all these little boxes that are checked and make sure they're followed through. This IEP is a legal document that they're required to follow. But just because the document looks great, you have to be aware at home with your student, with the work that's coming home, and by maybe going up to volunteering, asking questions, and making sure all of services that are in the document are actually being provided. And I know that can be difficult to do, but the more you're involved, the more your child will get. And the whole idea of least restrictive environment is a child shouldn't have to fight their way out of a segregated environment. They should be put in the least restrictive environment, given the supports, and only if they can't make appropriate progress for them would they be put in a more segregated setting. So let's see what's next. You're going to see on the next page all these different little boxes. They're talking about placement in the general, what keeps them from being in the general ed class, behaviors, do they need speech therapy? Make sure you want to ask what the speech therapy is going to look like. If it's individual, small group, how many are in the group? You want to know all those things. Some of the best speech pathologists we had, they shared ideas for us to work on at home too. So that was always helpful. And then there's more information about consideration of potential harmful effects if the student is removed from the general ed classroom. If you go, you can see where this student is not going to have any opportunities to participate with students without disabilities, even in non-academic or curricular or extracurricular activities. So hopefully that doesn't happen as much today. And then just, we kind of talked about that. We don't want you to stress over every minute of the day, but you do want to know how much time is your child going to be in regular ed and special ed, and are they going to go to music with their typical peers or PE? What's that going to look like? So this next page is, oh, go ahead, Judy. Were you gonna say?
Yeah, so we always teach parents that you want to work collaboratively with schools. You know, the expression, you get more with honey than you do with vinegar. And you always want to work with teachers the best they can. You know, our teachers need so much support. They are doing the best they can. They are managing so many students, so many tasks, and they're really trying their best for the most part. And you always want to work with them, not against them.
Right.
And you want to, you know, like anything, you pick the most important issues with your child that are important to you and pick 3 or 4. And then some things, sometimes you just have to let it go.
Yeah. But there's a lot of things as a parent that you can advocate for that this teacher may not feel like she's able to speak up. You know, a lot of times they're told not to, like training, like going to an autism conference or having a paraprofessional in the room to help out, you know. You don't want the teacher to be overwhelmed because, you know, inclusion done wrong is worse than segregation. So if you want your child to be included in the regular ed class, you want to make sure they have the appropriate supports and accommodations and supplementary services in order to be successful there, because you don't want it to be done wrong, and then it's going to be a bad experience for your child, the teacher, and then everybody thinks inclusion is terrible because it wasn't done correctly. So anyway, so this is the schedule of services page. This is one of the most important pages in the IEP because it's going to tell you what special education services your child is going to receive for how many minutes per day and what that's going to look like. So you just, if they're talking about paraprofessional support, you're not going to see that on this because this student was going to be in a self-contained class for early childhood. You would see how many minutes the student is going to have in-class support for regular education, or how many minutes are they going to be in a resource class. Maybe they need a resource class for math or reading. So this is a really important page to look at and make sure it's correct and the minutes add up right. You're on this one, you're seeing 2 different ones because you're seeing for the date from November to the end of the school year, and then for when the new school year picks up until their next annual ARD date. It's going to list where your child will be during different parts of the day too. So some students receive all their special education services in the general ed classroom. Some receive all in the special ed, and then any mixture of that. Also, like my son went to regular ed for certain parts of the day. He couldn't attend to large group things. So that's when they pulled him out and did more one-on-one to work on his specific goals. But this is an important page to understand. So just remember, this whole document is a legal document that they have to follow. So you don't want to sign off on it if you don't understand it or you don't agree with it.
And you also want to make sure that everything is written in the document. If somebody says something to you verbally and it's not written, then it may have never happened. So you always want to make sure that everything is in writing in that document.
Yeah, and you can do that in the deliberations, or sometimes we call the minutes of the meeting. Like if you're asking about speech therapy and what that's going to look like, I always put a little note card in front of me or have somebody with me say, oh, would you document that in the minutes that he's going to have small group speech. There won't be more than 4 kids in the group. It's going to be a licensed speech pathologist, not a speech assistant. Whatever questions you ask, just nicely say to the person taking the minutes, can you please document that in the minutes? And then make sure you look at all of that before you sign off. Another thing on this page is extended school year services. So some students are going to need some services on breaks, like during the summer. And that is part of the autism supplement, but it could be for any student who has a disability. If they lose ground, over long breaks, they may need some services. You don't have to accept them. A lot of times they automatically mark no, but if you feel like your student does need some services, and it's individualized too. It's like one year, my son, he didn't go to the ESY program because they all have these programs that might not be appropriate for every student, but he got speech services. I have a friend whose son went to he was having trouble in reading, and so he went to a summer school program for typical kids, but had special education support in that program. So it can look very different. Also, that should be individualized. Also, special transportation is on there. I know we hear a lot from some school districts where they tell the parents this student can't have special transportation. I would disagree with that. If the student needs special transportation in order to get to school, if they're not in school, they're not going to make appropriate progress on the curriculum. So yes, they do need it. So that make sure you get all of that ironed out. Let's see. Go to where it's some of the IEP services, speech. I can't tell what page. You're kind of far ahead, Judy. The one that says IEP services and supports necessary to implement the IEP, the duration and frequency. This is the one on speech. It says that this student is getting direct speech services, which means sometimes there's consult speech services where the speech pathologist only talks with the teacher and then the teacher implements it. But this student is going to have 30 minutes, 7 sessions per 9 weeks. I don't know why it's 7 per 9 weeks. Generally speaking, you would want to have at least once a week. For my student, he needed one-on-one speech for 30 minutes a week, and then another 30 minutes in a small group setting to transfer those skills to a group setting or to the class even. It could take place out on the playground or at lunch, the group, so he could transfer the skills he learned one-on-one into the natural environment. So this is things you want to look at, and everything's negotiable. So if your student needs speech and the speech evaluation showed they're only going to get this much, you might want to ask for an independent speech evaluation, especially if your only speech is going to be through the school. Like our insurance wouldn't cover speech private speech. So we weren't able to do speech after school at a speech therapy clinic, because we couldn't afford it without the insurance. So we needed to get as much speech through the school district as possible. Let's see.
Now I'm going to put I know that we have already run over and we still have quite a bit more to do. So I'm going to put the survey link in. And for those of you who want a copy of this, we're happy to send you a copy of the recording.
Yes, and I believe Christina put some links at the top of the chat. One is to the IDEA parent handbook. Print it out, read it, learn it, use it, take it with you to every meeting. The more you know, the better you can advocate for your child and know what to do if you disagree. We have, if you go to Family Network's website and scroll down to the bottom, you can click on our YouTube channel, and we have a lot of these trainings there. One is about what to do if you disagree. And Disability Rights Texas is also our state advocacy agency in case you need some help and can't afford an advocate, to pay for an advocate yourself. And also another great organization is Texas Parent to Parent, because I don't know if everybody knows, but Family to Family was not able to secure funding, so we are not going to be around anymore, unfortunately. And so just want you to have some other options for help. And Disability Rights Texas and Texas Parent to Parent are two very good organizations too. Another thing in here is this child's going to has personal care services. And so a lot of times they want to bill Medicaid for that, and that's fine. If you want to agree to it, you don't have to. If you don't agree to it, your child is still going to get personal care services, but it's a different extra funding stream for the school to provide, personal care to students who need a lot of help with their personal care. And if your student doesn't have Medicaid, they're going to get it anyway. So one thing I pointed out, it's on the page, I'm not on the deliberations page, where this parent gave them permission. It was during COVID. They were going to have it virtually, but she gave them permission to have the art if she wasn't available at that time. I don't recommend doing that. You need to be part of the ARD meeting because it's a lot harder to go back and change things. So the ARD meeting should be scheduled at a mutually agreed upon time for you and the school district. And so y'all should work together to have a time where you can attend. The worst thing you can do is not attend your child's ARD meeting, because then you have no input whatsoever in what's going to happen that year with your student. And you're going to see everybody signs a list of people. It's good to know everybody's name in case you need to reach out to, the district representative or the general ed teacher if you have questions about curriculum, or the speech pathologist if you need to contact her. So it's really important for you to know who all these people are. Oh, I was going to see if there was anything else, but you can see some of the deliberations document a lot of things that they talked about that were on other pages, but this is where you can get details that are not going to be in the paperwork that we just went through. So if it's not in writing, it's probably not going to happen. So make sure anything important is in writing. Oh, don't worry, we're going to do this, that, and the other. Okay. Can you put that in the minutes that Ms. Principal said this is going to happen. This is who's going to be responsible. This is when it's going to happen, all of those things. Let's see.
Are you on members in attendance?
Yeah, that's what I just talked about.
Okay.
You go
And
down.
at this point, Leonella is going to take over. I have to take my son to a doctor's appointment. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing, and then Leonella has the PowerPoint. And Leonella, you're going to pick up on slide number 34.
Yeah, I'd like to go to the signature page because we're almost
Sure.
done.
Okay, if you can just give me a few minutes so I can do that transition.
Yep.
Yep. And I can talk to you a little bit about it while she's doing that.
And I'm going to say goodbye.
Bye, Judy.
As
Thank
Leslie
you.
mentioned, sadly, our grant funding did not come through. We will be having a session in August on the legislative updates. Really, really important to know what's going on in our state. We encourage you to join us. We have a guest presenter. Who will be joining us and giving us a legislative update. I'll be checking email for those of you who would like a copy of this PowerPoint. Please email me, and I'm happy to send you a recording of it. Give me a couple of days, and I'd be happy to. I hope to see you in August. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve all of you. And I will be checking my email. I'll be going to another agency. Would love to reconnect if you're still looking for further support. So Leslie, thank you. I will talk to you later, and I apologize. Let me make Leonella a co-host. I want to make sure she gets on before I leave. Oh, you're welcome, Lorena.
Okay, I'm here. I'm gonna share my screen.
Okay. And if you want to start on slide 34.
Thanks, Judy.
Oh, absolutely. I
Sorry,
want to
did-
keep in touch with people.
That I did post the 3 links that Leslie was talking about for everybody to have on hand.
Yeah, and
I
of
can't
course,
hear anymore.
Are you able to share, Leonella? There you go.
Oh, it's not on the screen?
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Now it
Oh,
is.
okay.
Go to number 34. There you go. Perfect. Thank you, ladies. I'll keep the recording on.
yeah, Leonella, if you'll go down to the one that says signatures of the committee members, I wanted to talk a little bit about that.
The previous ones?
I can't tell. I had to put it up. No, keep going further down.
Oh,
But
forward?
towards
or
the
back?
end. Yeah, towards the end.
Oh, okay. I was going back, sorry.
That's okay. That one right there. So at the end of the meeting, we talked about this. You're going to have to agree or disagree. Don't agree unless you understand and agree to everything. Now, if they've only allotted a certain amount of time for your IEP meeting and you're not finished, don't let them rush you. Don't say, oh, we got to sign it today. You can table the ARD meeting and set up a time to come back and finish. But that's different than a disagreement. If they won't let you table it and come back and you're not finished, then your only option would be, I would say, to disagree, because then that throws you into a 10-day recess and they are required to come back. But if you don't agree or you don't understand something and they don't have time to explain it and you can't hash it out right then, don't agree to something that you don't agree with. And if they say, oh, well, then we can't do this or that. Well, no, that's not true. The other IEP would stay in effect until you get everything worked out. I'm not saying you're going to disagree about every little thing, but if it's something real important, have a 10-day recess or more. Sometimes you have a longer recess, if you're going to do independent evaluation. But everybody should be on board. And this is all in that IDEA parent handbook. That's why you should read it, highlight it, tab pages. I don't know how many times parents say, well, I didn't agree, but I checked agree. So, you know, that's not how it's supposed to work. If you're not in agreement about something very important, you know, you don't want to agree with it. Let's see, next page is prior written notice. And that's just, they're required to let you know if they refuse to do something or if they're proposing to do something. They can't just change something without letting you know. So that's what this is about. Next page, Leonella. Yeah, that's, so if you see prior written notice, that's what that's about. And then the next page tells you on this one, I don't know if I see this on everybody's, but it tells you who you can talk to if you have questions, the licensed school psychologist, the education, each area of Texas has an education service center. They're very helpful. Here in Houston, ours is ESC4. SpedTex is another great resource. You can call them, you can chat online, email them, ask them questions. A lot of times you have to ask them questions more than once and make it very specific because they'll just kind of refer you to the law. And so you might have to follow up with a question that says, so you're saying this law is saying this, you know, if you want to just make sure. I like to do the chat because I can cut and paste it. And then if I need to show it to somebody at the school district, I have, oh, this is what SpedTex said. And the people that man the SpedTex phones, I believe they are from the Education Service Center. So the schools know that they know what they're talking about. And not that the schools are trying to do anything wrong. It's just that sometimes they don't know all the details of the law. And so sometimes, and if you know your rights, you're going to know more a lot of times than some of the people at the ARD meeting. So that's a great website, SpedTex. You can also go to SpedTex to get a copy of your procedural safeguards. You know, they give you those at least once a year or tell you how to get that. And it comes in a lot of different languages. You should read your procedural safeguards. It tells you what to do if you don't agree. It gives you, they give you those for a reason. A lot of parents will say, well, they did this and they did that. No, you're an equal member of the ARD committee. And if you don't agree with something, it's up to you to follow the special education process and know what to do if you disagree. You can file a complaint, mediation, or due process. And those are three different procedural safeguards that you have. And there's help out there with Disability Rights Texas, SpedTex, Texas Parent to Parent. Our website has a lot of great information. If you explore our website, Texas Project First website has a lot of great information where you can search and get your questions answered. So I just can't stress enough on you knowing your rights, reading your procedural safeguards, reading the parent manual, and knowing what to do if you do need to disagree. Go to the next one, Leonella. I just put this in there. This student had the autism. If your student is on the autism spectrum and that's one of their disability labels for special education, they should have an autism supplement as part of their IEP, and it's 11 extra protections that the ARD committee has to consider. It should be very child specific, and there's examples in here. But it should be very specific to your child in these areas: daily schedule, positive behavior supports, suitable staff to student ratio. You know, some students need a one-on-one. Some students can do things in a small group or a larger group. So communication interventions, social skills. If your student struggles with social skills, that should be addressed and how it's going to be addressed. This is a very powerful supplement to the IEP if your student has autism and you don't let them just skim over it and put cookie cutter information in here. And then you're going to see, if you keep going, Leonella, there's the information about some of the things, personal care services. If your child, that's the one I was saying, you know, make sure, you know, they shouldn't have, if your student doesn't need help with toileting, that shouldn't be checked. I just want you to be aware of all of this. And then if you scroll down further, there's something about transportation. We kind of talked about that. And then further down, you'll see, keep going down, Leonella, and you'll see Medicaid consent form. That's where if your student has Medicaid insurance, you can sign off for them to bill your Medicaid for personal care services, but you don't have to if you don't want to. And then if you go down, you'll see a receipt for explanation of the procedural safeguards. They have to, you know, show that they've given you the procedural safeguards and or tell you how to get a copy of the procedural safeguards, because that's very important for you to know your rights. And then you can go down to the survey, Leonella. Please take the survey. It helps us if we were able to ever get another grant again. It lets them know that the training we were doing is helpful to parents. So we would really appreciate it if you would take our survey. And then I was going to see if there were any questions in the chat box. And I know if some of y'all have to leave, I understand. Somebody had a question, if you're still on, about speech therapy. You can unmute yourself if you're still on and want to ask me a question.
Yes, I don't see any other.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's Julia. Hello.
Was that you, Jacinia?
Yeah, that was me.
Okay. Yeah. What?
I had a curiosity because when my son has just started school. He's going to his second year at pre-K. And when we had the art meeting to set the goals for next year, I felt like my son needs more time of speech therapy. And I asked the therapist if she has done some kind of like a progress report where I could see, you know, based on what she has been working with him, if he has had progress, or if we can say that he's not progressing enough to say that he needs more time. And she told me that she doesn't have a progress report ready yet by the day that we had the art meeting. So I don't know if that's something that they should do before they decide how much therapy he needs to put it on the IEP.
Yeah. So initially when, you know, the initial speech and language evaluation is going to help determine how much therapy he gets. And then his progress should be, she should have had been prepared for the ARD meeting to update you so far on his progress. Absolutely. But what I would recommend is if you don't feel like your student is receiving an appropriate amount, they don't have to do what's best, but they have to do what's appropriate amount of speech therapy, then I would ask for an independent educational evaluation in the area of speech and language. And what that does is that gets you a second opinion that they have to consider. And not that they have to go by, but if an outside speech evaluation shows that he needs more than what he's getting now, they have to take that into consideration. And then if they still wouldn't agree to it, you could disagree, and you would have that evaluation that kind of opposes theirs if you filed a complaint or mediation or due process or whatever. Another thing I recommend is I would go up and observe my student having speech therapy. So you know what goes on, and what does that look like? When my son was really young, in the early childhood, I was tipped off by a paraprofessional that he was not receiving his speech, that the speech pathologist was taking him out, and the pair would go with him, and that she was just writing notes as if she was giving him speech. So I think it's really important for special education classes um, and speech, if you're having speech therapy, that you go up and observe, see what's going on, especially if your child can't tell you what's going on. So I would definitely read the part about getting an independent educational evaluation. You don't have to do the whole evaluation. You can do pieces if you want to, if that's all you're worried about is speech and language. Or if you were worried about OT, or if you needed an academic reading evaluation or whatever, learn about getting a second opinion through an independent educational evaluation, and that can be paid for by the school. They have to have appropriate credentials. You don't have to pick someone off their list if you don't want to, as long as they will contract with the school district to be paid for it. So I hope that helps. Did anybody else have any questions? Okay, well, I sure enjoyed doing this with you guys, and I'm sorry we're not going to be around anymore. I still have my work email, and Judy does. I think we're all going to still have access to them, but it would be definitely on a volunteer basis. But if you want to ever reach out, you're welcome to do so. And please take the survey. Thank you so much for being here, and we wish you the best. Y'all have a great day.
And they can still access all our previous trainings on YouTube.
Yes, we talked about, if you go to Family Networks website, scroll all the way down to the bottom and click on the YouTube channel, and then you'll see all of our trainings, videos, and you can access them there. Very importantly, Anela, for bringing that up. And then, are y'all doing this in Spanish?
Yes, we are. And I'm still gonna continue to do the Spanish ones
Oh, great.
because I stay on till August, remember?
Right. And can you let them know, do you put that on the Family to Family Facebook page, or how?
Yes, we
Okay.
have a Spanish group that we have, and Christina and myself, we always create a flyer and we post it on there letting them know when we're going to be. I believe this day I can find out for you what date it was that we're going to be presenting. But usually it's the week after you guys, but let me just make sure.
Okay. Yeah, no, we're not going to shut down our YouTube channel. We're going to leave that up. And also our website is a good place to see upcoming trainings.
Oh, yes, because we had a lot of families ask us about that, but the resources will be up.
Yes, lots of great resources.
So
Thank
we'll be presenting in Spanish on the 22.
Yes, Tuesday, the 22nd for the same presentation in Spanish.
6 to
And we
7.
still have the one in English in August and also the Spanish one. And we'll just get people the reminders that they need so they can attend.
Oh,
Yeah.
great, great. And thank you all for your kind words. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And I'll message I guess Mary Jane or Judy, Leslie, because I've had a lot of families that I've helped out message me regarding the post that if they can donate still, if there was anything they can do, etc.
Okay, yeah, reach out to Mary Jane because I've had the same too, Leonella.
Yeah, a lot of people are asking, can we do anything? Is there donations that we can ask for or start? There was a lady that said there was something where they can share and ask for donations directly from their Facebook to go straight to family. And I was like, I don't know, you might want to email.
Yeah, Mary Jane. Yeah. And maybe we can talk about that this coming Monday when we all get
Did
together.
we stop the recording already?
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Sorry. Because it doesn't show the recording option on my end.
Oh, maybe Judy cut it off.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah,
think
'cause-
what we can do is just leave and
Oh,
then it'll stop.
oh, there, I think I see it now once I stop share. Sorry, guys.